If you've ever felt like you were being controlled in a relationship, cherished like everything one moment, then ignored like nothing the next, this video is for you. This isn't just a story about pain or manipulation. It's a journey into uncovering the subtle mechanisms narcissists use to hijack your emotions and your life. You may have asked yourself time and again, why am I not enough? Why do they change so quickly? Or even, is this my fault? These questions don't come from weakness, they arise because you've been pulled into a power dynamic designed to make you doubt your own feelings and self-worth. That's why what you need isn't just to understand how they manipulate, but to recognize the things that completely unnerve them. In this video, I'll reveal 7 triggers that narcissists simply cannot handle. These triggers don't just expose their true nature, they give you the insight to flip the script, reclaim your power, and protect what matters most, your peace and your self-respect. If you've ever felt trapped in a relationship full of chaos, contradictions, and emotional exhaustion, stay until the end of the video. What you're about to discover could be the turning point in your journey back to yourself. And if this message resonates with you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you can join me in rebuilding your boundaries, reconnecting with your true worth, and stepping out of the cycle of pain one clear step at a time. Trigger 1. When you ignore them. Imagine one day you choose silence. You don't reply to their messages, don't compliment them in a meeting, don't check in or give them attention at a group gathering. It's as if you're stepping out of the emotional game they've always controlled. And instantly they feel the storm coming, their emotional supply has been cut. That's the first trigger, being ignored, something a narcissist simply cannot tolerate. You see, narcissists don't thrive on connection, they survive on emotional supply, your time, your attention, your energy, your praise, even your pity or conflict. As long as you react, they're being fed. But the moment you stop, go silent, they become unbalanced. Your attention is the fuel for their bottomless ego. When that fuel runs out, they falter, their control wavers, and the illusion begins to crack. You don't need dramatic confrontations or to expose their game. Sometimes not replying to a message, not prioritizing them with your attention, or simply focusing on someone else in a conversation is enough to shift the dynamic. It's a quiet strategy, but profoundly powerful. Every time you choose silence, you're resetting the power balance they once dominated. Here's what's important. Can't handle doesn't always mean they'll explode immediately. More often they'll react in subtle yet calculated ways, sending love bombs as if nothing ever happened, making you feel guilty, or stirring up rumors and drama to reel you back in. These aren't signs of failure, they're confirmation that you've disrupted their emotional control. Psychological studies and emotional abuse patterns show that narcissists are highly sensitive to abandonment and invisibility. When attention disappears, so does their sense of dominance. It doesn't just lower their perceived value, it cracks the self-image they obsessively maintain. Your silence becomes a break in the supply chain they're addicted to. Moreover, psychological research on survivors of narcissistic abuse shows that ignoring a narcissist can deeply unbalance their emotional state. They don't just lose attention, they lose access to the emotional levers they've always pulled. Still, silence isn't just a tactic, it's a form of self-command. When conversations spiral into chaos, when explanations are twisted into ammunition against you, the most powerful act is to remain calm. You diffuse the game by refusing to play, because no reaction means no leverage and no foothold into your emotional world. Let's be clear, this isn't about revenge or coldness. It's about drawing boundaries from a place of self-respect. When you no longer need their validation to feel worthy, you reclaim your rightful center in your own life. And you know what's beautiful? Every time you choose silence, you're not just rejecting their game, you're reclaiming time, energy, and peace. You learn to appreciate the sound of your own breath in the absence of their validation. You protect your emotional reserves from being hijacked by invisible power games. And most of all, you send a message to yourself: I have the right to opt out of manipulation, and I have the right to choose peace instead. To you, the one who's been exhausted from explaining, proving, and holding on, learning to ignore isn't giving up. It's stepping away from a game you never wanted to play in the first place. When you go silent, you start anew, the first step to reclaiming the power you once handed over. Trigger 2. Calm, unemotional truth. You see, with a narcissist, shouting, arguing, or even you losing your temper doesn't scare them. In fact, they thrive on that chaos. But there's one thing they simply cannot tolerate: the truth spoken calmly, clearly, and without emotion. Narcissists survive by constructing an ideal self, a version of themselves that others reflect back to them. When you speak up with grounded clarity like, "That never happened to me," or "I don't feel the way you say I do," you're peeling off the mask they work so hard to keep on. These truths can't be twisted, distorted, or emotionally reversed. There's no justification. No need for sympathy. Just the truth, sharp, direct, and unshakable. Unemotional truth is a mirror they cannot manipulate. When they cast you as a character in their script, they need a costume, an audience, and a partner willing to clap on cue. When you refuse to react, to engage, or to bow down in words, you reclaim your role as the narrator of your own life. They lose control because there's nothing left to manipulate. It might surprise you, but leading psychological voices like Dr. Ramani Dovasula and author George Simon agree, the thing narcissists fear most is truth that can't be twisted. A simple, calm phrase like, "That's not how I remember it," or "She never did that to me," can leave them shaken. They can't convert that into a new version of the reality they need to maintain. And this is where your power lies. When you hold on to the truth without explanation, without argument, without justification, you deny them the chance to rewrite the story in their favor. You're taking the narrative back. When they ask, "Why would you say that?" you say nothing. When they bait you into a long defense, you respond with, "I don't need to explain." Let them see a version of you they can't bend. It rattles them deeply. No more echo, no more reflection to dominate. They're forced to confront a reality they can't control. And that's destabilizing. This isn't passive behavior, it's an intentional stance. Because when you state the truth plainly as a declaration, you're cutting off the fuel that keeps them center stage in your emotional world. Ironically, it's not noise that breaks their dominance, it's your calm, your clarity, and your refusal to play the emotional game. So the next time they try to restart the story, just say, "That's not how I remember it," or "She's never done that with me," or "That's not accurate." No fighting, no dragging it out. When you refuse to enter their narrative, you deny them the ability to redefine you. If you find yourself constantly explaining, trying to make them understand, trying to avoid their anger, you've fallen back into the trap. This second trigger is about holding your truth silently, but firmly. When you don't join their tension game, you neutralize their power. Feel the shift. They're disoriented. They lose their go-to tactics. They want you compliant, apologetic, easy to sway. But you have no obligation to smile when they're angry or look away when they're shaken. Just stay clear, and stay you. Trigger 3. When they are no longer the center of attention. Narcissists cannot stand not being treated as the most important person in the room. They crave every glance, every compliment, every ounce of emotional energy. And if you refuse to place them at the center, you're striking a deep wound, the loss of control. Imagine this: you and the narcissist attend a wedding, a reunion, or a celebration, while others are congratulating you, celebrating you, and you're smiling, receiving attention. They feel like they've been pushed out of the universe they believe they control. They may lash out. They may create drama, start a conflict, or do something to pull your attention away from the moment and back to them. This happens on your birthday, after a big achievement, or even just when you're being acknowledged by friends. They'll do anything to draw you back into the shadows because they need you to remember they come first. They might respond with passive-aggressive remarks, pity plays, or full-blown smear campaigns to suggest they've been forgotten or mistreated. Each "I deserve attention too" moment is a bid to drag the spotlight back to themselves. Even when you've done nothing wrong, merely decline to make them the emotional focal point that alone can destabilize them. This isn't about being cruel or dismissive, it's about setting boundaries. Choosing not to elevate them to emotional royalty is one of the most powerful forms of self-preservation. When you stop making them the centerpiece, you're protecting your emotional space. When narcissists aren't treated like the most important person in every setting, when they're not praised, prioritized, or coddled, they often retaliate. They may stir up drama, give you the silent treatment, or manipulate you emotionally to make you feel like you've let them down. It's a way to re-establish your dependency, to remind you of your role in their script. That's why, in every small interaction, a team meeting, a holiday dinner, a group gathering, ask yourself, am I unintentionally shifting focus back to them, or am I staying grounded in my own presence? You don't have to draw all the attention, you just need to stop handing it over to someone who only wants it to maintain control. This becomes even more crucial when you're exhausted from always trying to make them feel seen. When they conveniently forget important things happening in your life, you may find yourself still trying to re-engage them out of guilt or obligation. That's the trap. They show up only to hijack your moment, and if you allow it, you lose connection with yourself. Scientific backing. According to studies on group dynamics and social dominance behavior, being removed from a central role causes narcissists to unravel quickly because they've fused their identity with being the center of attention. Without that recognition, they feel irrelevant. When social energy moves elsewhere, they scramble to pull it back, usually through conflict, blame, or attention-seeking. You don't have to confront them directly, you just need to stop reacting the way they expect. When they chase the spotlight, you don't need to step aside, just don't hand it to them. Stay calm, neutral, and grounded. That imbalance they feel. It's a loss of control, and they don't know how to regain it without your cooperation. What's the smarter choice? Let them shout. You stay still. No blame, no competition, just being fully present in your moment. When you don't react, they lose their audience. And you reclaim a space where you get to be yourself, no longer distorted through their gaze. You're creating an emotional space where you don't need them to feel seen. You hold your power in your own soul, and that energy starts working, pulling you further from the performance and closer to the freedom that doesn't rely on anyone else's validation but your own. Trigger 4. When you hold the narcissist accountable. Narcissists are known for making promises they don't keep. They say they'll change but repeat the same hurtful patterns. With every empty word and repeated action, they construct a psychological game, keeping you in a constant state of unease without ever needing to raise their voice. That's why one of the biggest triggers for a narcissist is being held accountable. When you calmly call out the truth by honoring your own experience with statements like, "You said you'd be here at 7, but you didn't show up," or "You promised to change, but your actions haven't," you tear down the illusion they've built to control the relationship. This isn't done in anger or aggression. It's a tool of self-respect, a clear way to protect yourself without engaging in loud confrontation. Narcissists thrive in ambiguity. They need you to endlessly blame yourself, as long as you don't become strong enough to ask the simple, direct question, why? When you push for answers, you strip away the shelter they've constructed for themselves, a space where they don't face consequences, don't explain, and don't get questioned. Questions like, "Do you remember what you said that day? When will you actually keep your word?" Or "Last time you followed through. Why not now?" These can unravel the veil they've placed over their manipulative patterns. But the key lies in being firm without being furious. You don't need rage, you need undeniable clarity. By refusing to accept promises that aren't followed by action, you fracture the emotional web they've spun to keep you quiet. Maybe they won't respond. That's okay. They might even spread rumors saying you're too demanding, too reactive, or too difficult. But what really unsettles them is that the usual vagueness that protected their lies no longer works. When you ask for something simple, clarity, accountability, commitment, you force them to either respond directly or face the reality that you're no longer the passive audience to their deception. You don't have to attack. You just have to avoid falling into the emotional traps they lay, that sense of hope for an apology that never arrives. Their silence in the face of your calm, firm questions is a loud answer. It confirms that they have no intention of keeping their word. More importantly, asking for accountability shifts the dynamics of the relationship. You're not arguing, you're inviting reality back into the conversation. You're respecting your own trust, your boundaries, and the consequences of emotional dishonesty. When you ask something like, "You said you'd change, but nothing is different. I need to know when you'll follow through," you're signaling that you're no longer easily manipulated. You're not bringing up the past to hurt them, you're honoring the present value of your feelings. This fourth trigger isn't about stirring conflict. It's about reinforcing your limits. When you require clarity and reject emotional vagueness, you become the only one in control of your emotional narrative. Narcissists cannot handle this because their power depends on ambiguity, evasion, and keeping you waiting. When you calmly and directly demand the truth without blaming, without yelling, the balance of power begins to shift. And in that moment, you'll begin to feel it clearly. You are the one holding the reins to your own emotional well-being. Trigger 5. When you no longer need them. This is the final but no less powerful trigger, and it occurs when you step out of the emotional web the narcissist spun around you the moment you no longer need them. They cannot tolerate this because their power is rooted in your dependence on them, whether emotional, financial, social, or mental. A narcissist thrives on the belief that you cannot survive without them. When they sense you can live without them, when your breath remains steady and your smile sincere even in their absence, they lose their feeling of security. Not because they love you, but because their control is slipping. They want you to feel that life without them is unimaginable, so they can keep directing your emotional storyline. Many of us are drawn in at first because we feel chosen, special, prioritized. But the truth is that attention often disguises an invisible surveillance. They train you to depend on them until you're afraid to say no. Gradually, you shrink boundaries, minimize your needs, and silence your emotions to fit into the limited space they allow. At this trigger, you begin to refuse dependence. You learn to say no, even in small ways like declining help you don't need, or withholding emotional or mental energy when there's no reason. When you stop asking permission, stop serving, stop proving your worth, you send a clear message. I don't need you to exist. Imagine this: when you walk away, they feel a visceral punch in their chest. When you are silent, they can no longer draw energy out of your longing. When you stop seeking approval, they lose control. They might test you quietly, offering help you don't want, watching your reaction closely. If you accept, they regain power. If you're dismissive, they panic. If you firmly decline, they feel the power balance slipping. Psychological research on trauma bonding shows that when narcissists sense your need decreasing, your craving for validation, attention, or support, they often react dramatically, creating false crises, destabilizing others, even stirring drama just to see if you'll return. Because if you don't need them, they lose their easiest point of control. The most surprising part: you don't need a grand gesture. No long explanation. Simply maintain your normalcy without dependence. If they make a subtle offer, you can say, "Thank you, but I'm okay." If they push into a manipulative conversation, respond with firm courtesy. You're teaching yourself that true power isn't controlling others, it's knowing you don't need to be controlled. You don't need to seem strong, you simply live authentically, untethered by their reactions. When this trigger fully activates, when you shed dependency, you reclaim the highest form of power, the right to live by your own values and needs, not someone else's expectations. They lose their roadmap because you no longer walk the path they designed. They lose control because you no longer rely on their reaction to orient yourself. And if this moment feels daunting, remember, you never truly lost yourself entirely. You're now learning to reintegrate your strength from a core they can't take away, the inherent value that exists independent of any relationship. When you don't need them to feel whole, you break free from the cycle of pain. You enter a new space, the space of emotional freedom. No more dependency, no more validation, no more control. This isn't about becoming cold, it's about drawing the final boundary. You deserve to live without depending on anyone to feel worthy. That's where true power emerges, when you don't need the phone to ring and yet remain at peace. When you don't need anyone's attention to feel wholly present. Trigger 5 marks a decisive turning point where you stop being a victim and become the author of your own story. You live for yourself, no longer chained to the inflated ego of another. That's real power. Trigger 6. When you stop being afraid of losing them. A narcissist's power over you doesn't stem from their charm, it's anchored in a deep fear within you, the fear of losing them. The moment you let go of that fear, you've entered a new territory of strength, the realm of inner freedom. And nothing terrifies them more than your courage to live without fearing their absence. They may have been your center, the person you called in joy and sorrow, the emotional pillar you leaned on. But behind that bond lies a control tactic built on your anxiety. If I leave, who will truly understand me? If they leave me, will I be forever alone? You stayed not because you didn't know the truth, but because you were afraid to face it solo. Narcissists are exceptionally skilled at detecting that fear of loss. They trigger it with sudden withdrawal, deliberate silence, or insinuations like, "No one will love you like I do," or "If you lose me, you'll regret it." These aren't just manipulation, they're invisible locks chaining you to the illusion of their indispensability. Then one day something shifts, you realize you are no longer afraid of losing them. Not because you're cold, but because you understand that what you called loss was actually liberation. Losing illusion isn't loss, it's recovery. Letting go of someone who never protected you is the first step in reclaiming yourself. That internal shift throws them into crisis. They sense peace in you, something they once used to sow chaos. They notice you don't check your phone constantly, don't draft and delete desperate messages, no longer wonder, how can I make them stay? Instead, you begin to ask, do I even want this anymore? They'll try to come back. They'll stir conflict, resurrect old memories, pretend they've improved. But this time you are different. You don't rush. You don't need them like before. Most importantly, you don't fear solitude. Psychological research shows manipulation thrives when victims believe their worth depends on another's presence. Once you break the belief, you become untouchable. A A narcissist doesn't just lose power when you stop fearing they lose their crafted image reflected through your dependency. Because they didn't love who you are, they loved the admiration, the dependency, the trembling fear you showed when you feared losing them. By standing in the truth that you don't need them to be whole, you strip them of the most crucial tool they ever had in your life: control. Trigger 7. When you dare to see the truth and stop making excuses for them. Narcissists aren't afraid of being disliked or misunderstood. What terrifies them most is being seen clearly. Throughout your relationship, they invested immense effort into crafting an image: the misunderstood good person, the wounded soul, the one trying to love you the only way they know how. They depended on your compassion and your desire to forgive, using those to keep you invested, even as your heart quietly fractured. Then one day you stopped rationalizing their behavior with excuses like, maybe they were hurt too deeply, or maybe they don't know any better, or they didn't mean to, maybe they're just stressed. Instead, you look at their behavior and call it as it is: emotional abuse, manipulation, a violation of your emotional autonomy. The moment you stop defending them is the moment you reclaim your voice. And for a narcissist, that is a fatal blow, because they can no longer manipulate someone who sees through their game. They lose power over someone who can say, I see you and I refuse to accept it anymore. No more rationalizing. No more explaining away toxic behavior. This is the first real step toward reclaiming internal justice. For the longest time, you sacrificed your truest feelings to maintain their carefully curated image in your mind. Why does this terrify them? Because when you stop making excuses, you stop sharing the blame. You stop being complicit in their narrative. And suddenly the roles reverse. They're the ones who caused harm, and you're the one who survived it. Truth, when observed without defense, has cleansing power. It doesn't just clarify who they are, it also helps you reconnect with yourself, someone who was patient, kind, hopeful. You weren't wrong for loving, you just needed to love yourself better. A narcissist cannot endure being confronted with truth, because when reality is named, the illusion collapses, and with the illusion, the fortress they built crumbles. They lose the hiding place they relied on. You may still feel pain, but that pain no longer stems from hidden wounds, it is the pain of awakening, and no one can ever take that away from you again. So, you've now walked through 7 emotional triggers, not just the things that send a narcissist into panic, but more importantly, the doorways back to yourself. Each one isn't a tactic to get back at them, it's a quiet declaration of inner power, that you are no longer driven by fear, manipulation, or the desperate need to be validated by someone who never knew how to love. You don't need to change to be enough for them, you need the courage to return to who you truly are. Remember, you don't defeat a narcissist by making them suffer. You win by refusing to hand them your self-worth. You win every time you choose silence over self-justification. Every time you say no without feeling guilty. Every time you walk away, even if there's still an echo of old affection in your heart. In the end, your strength doesn't lie in retaliation, it lies in choosing not to let them write the next chapter of your life. If you're at the beginning of this journey, know this: you are not alone. And yes, you can move forward one small step at a time, but in the right direction. And if you'd like to go deeper into healing, setting boundaries, and rediscovering your true worth, don't forget to subscribe. Because this isn't an easy journey, but I promise you, it will be worth it. You've already started, and you're doing better than you think.